ワールドデコーダー始まります。今日のテーマは Apple の光と影、 iPhone 17大ヒットの裏側です。 Apple の iPhone 17が今売れ行き絶好調なんですね。1月29日に発表されたばかりの最新決算では売上高、純利益ともに過去最高となりました。でその一方で生成 AI 競争に乗り遅れている Apple は Google の Gemini との連携を発表し、 AI 機能 Siri の独自開発は諦めた格好です。で好業績に沸く Apple なんですが、このまま iPhone の巨人として生き残れるのか、そして今は亡きスティーブ・ジョブズ氏の後を継いだティム・クック CEO の後継問題も取り沙汰されています。そんな揺れる Apple の今後について、この会社を世界の誰よりも深く取材するブルームバーグのマーク・ガーマン記者に今回もお話を伺います。そしてトークのポイントは3つです。 iPhone の絶頂と Siri の失敗、2つ目がティム・クック帝国の行方、そして最後が Apple に迫る AI デバイスの脅威です。では早速始めましょう。 We have Mark Gurman, Bloomberg's Apple reporter on the show today. It's so great to have you back again.
Thanks for having me. Always good to join you.
Great. So Mark, Apple delivered the record quarterly sales and profit in December quarter. The results obviously reflected the success of iPhone 17. So what was the reaction to the earnings?
Yeah, I mean, the reaction on the stock market was actually quite muted. You didn't see a big jump that maybe some would have expected to the stock price given the reality that they crushed it on profits. They beat Wall Street expectations significantly on both iPhone revenue and overall revenue. There were some downsides, right? Like wearables, home and accessories, missed expectations, Mac missed expectations to some degree. But those are generally not reasons for a stock decline. Really two major factors. I think one, and this is a more minor factor, is memory and pricing there and the potential for lower margins as the year goes on. But I think the bigger factor is that Apple is simply in the eyes of investors and day traders and what have you, they're just not an exciting company right now, right? They're basically treadmill running. They're coming out with new products on an annual basis, mostly spec bumps. You're not seeing major initiatives in the artificial intelligence space, no exciting moonshots coming soon. So definitely I think that is playing the bigger factor. It's, the company is doing awesome in the short term and they're going to print money for a very long time. But in terms of true excitement, where is that? And I think that's the question on the minds of some.
But if you look at the numbers, Apple's having a strong momentum right now. So is Apple going to maintain this momentum for the whole year? What do you think the year 2026 is going to be for Apple?
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting year. I mean, in terms of the current quarter, the March period, they're projecting revenue growth for as much as 16%, which is going to be very significant. Like the holiday quarter, they're projecting services revenue to grow in line with the growth last quarter. Last quarter, it grew so significantly that they topped $30 billion for that segment for the first time. I think they're anticipating iPhone sales to continue to be strong in the March quarter because there was so much pent-up demand, and still, according to them, not in supply-demand balance because the demand is so high that they're not able to have as much supply for the device. In a matter of weeks here, you'll still see launches of new products. You'll see a spec-bumped MacBook Pro. You'll see a spec-bumped MacBook Air. You'll see spec bumps to the entry-level iPad as well as the iPad Air. Later in the year, you'll see Apple release its first foldable iPhone. That's going to be quite significant and a big achievement for them to finally get rid of that crease that has been present on Google models and Samsung models and some of the Chinese foldable models for a very long time now. You're going to see a pretty revolutionary upgrade to the MacBook Pro end of year with faster chip. You're going to see a touchscreen. You're going to see OLED. So definitely some good stuff in the product roadmap. And then in the years ahead, moving into areas like robotics, home devices, security peripherals, smart glasses, new types of AirPods and wearables, etc. So a lot of peripherals, a lot of accessories.
Right. So let's get into the first part. So the booming iPhone and the failed Siri. So as we discussed, Apple's sales and net income hit a record high in the past quarter, and earnings beat the Wall Street estimates. And it was the fastest growth for iPhone since 2021, as you wrote in the article. So sales could have been even bigger if they could get enough supply. So what's the biggest factor behind the success of iPhone 17 and what attracted consumers globally?
Yeah, I think there's a few factors. I mean, specifically, I would say that the regular iPhone 17, this is the entry-level model, is a really significant year-over-year update. They added like pro features like much improved camera performance. You have the dual 48 megapixel lenses there. You have the ProMotion display. So it is a monster of an upgrade on an annual basis for that sub $800 price point. And so they did a really nice job there. Part of the reason why they did that is because you're not going to see the base level iPhone be updated again until deep into 2027. So they're skipping the base level iPhone 18 upgrade in 2026. The other thing to note is the iPhone Air, as impressive as the design, that was not a material or meaningful mover of iPhone units for 2025. I don't expect that to be a meaningful player in 2026 as well. It's all about the Pro phones, the 17 Pro and the 17 Pro Max. There's a phrase, keep it simple, stupid, right? They kept it simple. They didn't get into any of the AI features. They didn't get into any whiz-bang nonsense. They really fixated on the core competencies, performance, battery life, the overall temperature and materials of the phone, colors, displays. So they just went straight down the middle. They launched what people wanted, and they gave it a new industrial design and meaningful new colors for the first time in half a decade. Upgrade cycles are, increasing. There used to be a time where the average upgrade cycle was between 2 to 3 years. Now we're in the 4 to 6 year range. And so we're really in the sweet spot. As you noted, the last time you saw iPhone growth of this magnitude was in 2021 with the iPhone 13 range. That was at the height of COVID. People were stuck at home. People wanted to blow cash on things. The 5G transition had just begun with the iPhone 12 the year prior, and there were a lot of supply issues there, and people weren't buying because they were holding on to their money at the beginning of COVID. So the iPhone 13 had a huge success story for Apple. And what are we? We're, 4 or 5 years since the iPhone 13 launch. So a lot of pent-up demand, a lot of upgrades. Also, the carriers had some very fierce and competitive offers and deals to get people to switch to them for discounts on the devices. So between the new design and the upgrade cycles, everything aligned very nicely for Apple for this launch.
Mm-hmm. Sticking to the basics and the upgrading cycle make Apple stronger in this quarter.
Exactly.
So do you think the iPhone is at its peak right now?
I don't think the iPhone is at its peak, to be honest with you. I think that there's not that much more room to grow on a quarterly sales basis, but I think the device is going to continue humming. It's a popular franchise. It's just like a Marvel movie franchise where every time a new movie or a second or another sequel or trilogy or whatever comes out, people are going to run to see it. So people are going to stick into the iPhone family and people are going to keep upgrading. So the iPhone is not going to be dissipating, but maybe growth will slow again at some point. But I do think the next two upgrade cycles, the 26 cycle and the 27 cycle, are both going to be very strong, potentially on par with this cycle, if not even stronger. I think the 18 Pro and 18 Pro Max upgrades next year are going to be compelling. You're going to have the 2nm processor. You're going to have improved optical zoom and lens technology on the cameras. But the bigger deal on iPhone revenue will be the foldable phone. And that should help Apple because they no longer report unit sales. Instead, they only report iPhone revenue sales. And from that standpoint, you're going to see ASPs go high because the foldable phone is going to sell for north of $2,000 a pop. And so that's going to do well for Apple. And then you're going to see the 20th anniversary phone in 2027, which also should continue to raise ASPs and help their bottom line too. So I think the plan was for these 3 years, the 25, 26, 27 cycles to be extraordinary. And, so far we're 1 for 1, and I think they'll go 2 for 2 and 3 for 3.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, as you said, the performance of iPhone will be stable and strong. But you've written and talked a lot about how behind Apple really is in AI. But I feel like it doesn't matter yet to consumers. And as the stock performance has not been as bad as we think it would be. So if you look at the recent share price of Apple. So I was wondering how people at Apple think about this situation, that they don't take this seriously as long as the iPhone sales is strong.
I think there's a mixed bag of opinions. I think there's some people who recognize that Apple is a product company and consumers don't necessarily care who's building the underlying technology. And so they're going to be satisfied with whomever is helping them, whether that's Google with the Gemini model, or in Asia, companies like Alibaba and Tencent. They just want it to work. The reality, though, to be honest with you, it doesn't work right now, right? Those features and functionalities have not launched yet. So they do have a long ways to go on AI. And yes, it's going to matter at some point. At some point, AI is going to become such table stakes that relying on a third party and a rival to be your model provider is simply not going to be effective. It's not going to give you a competitive advantage. One of the reasons that Apple's processors run so well is because they're built with the rest of the stack, and that gives them a supreme competitive advantage. AI is a core technology of that same ilk. And if they're not the ones owning it, they're not going to be able to finely tune the AI to the devices and the features and services they want to launch. So there is inherent large amounts of risk of not owning the underlying AI stack. So eventually they are going to have to do that.
When do you think AI will really matter in the hardware sales?
I think a few years from now. I mean, like I said, I think that the iPhone cycles will do really well for the next 2 years. But if other companies start launching devices that are more competitive than Apple in the AI space, people are going to start to take another look. And, you know, the downside for Apple is that the European Union, the European Commission, I should say, and other regulatory bodies around the world, including in Japan, are forcing Apple to make it easier to switch away from their current devices. And so the easier they make it to switch away, and at the same time, those other companies are becoming more compelling for the hot new technology, it does put Apple in a precarious position. And so there is, like I said, inherently a lot of risk to the company right now.
In January, Apple struck a partnership with Google Gemini. They announced that the Apple Foundation models in Siri will be based on Gemini models. But Apple could maintain the existing partnership with OpenAI or seek the new partnership with Anthropic Claude. So what was the thinking, the decision-making process leading up to Gemini partnership?
So the story right now with Apple AI is that there's basically two components to it. There's the on-device and on-cloud AI that uses Apple's internal models. So that powers things like writing tools, Genmoji, Image Playground to some extent, and of course Siri. Doesn't work very well. Then there's the world knowledge input into Siri itself, and that uses ChatGPT from OpenAI to source that data. What Apple is doing is they're changing the underlying models that power Siri with that model co-developed with Google for Gemini. In terms of the OpenAI integration within Siri, that is not going away, but that is completely separate. When they were researching what they should do about fixing their underlying models, obviously there was one path, which is stick down the path of using your internal AFM Apple Foundation models. Then there's the other path of partnering. And so they looked very closely with OpenAI as a model collaborator, and they looked very closely, actually extremely closely at Anthropic, and they got into, you know, deal terms and what have you before abandoning that and partnering with Google.
Why did not they go to Anthropic at the end of the day?
You know, at the end of the day, you know, Apple's internal data indicated that Anthropic was the leader of the pack in terms of overall quality and the use cases they wanted to hit. They determined that Gemini was almost on par, not far behind, but the pricing power and collaborative nature of the existing relationship with Google and the speed that Google's able to operate at, and the fact that Google's not there pushing their models to every company like Anthropic is doing, because that's their business model, I think made Google a lot more appealing to them, especially given the fact that they didn't have to worry about the Department of Justice, given that a judge ruled in September, actually, that they would not have to break up their existing search arrangement with Google. So a lot more opportunities down the road there, things like search between Apple and Google as well.
Was that a big win for Google?
I think it's a significant win for Google from a PR and marketing standpoint, having the world's biggest devices company come to you and publicly use your models to power some of their AI technology. I think is definitely a huge win for them, and definitely would make them more interesting to shareholders, but also make them more interesting to other potential customers.
Great. For new Siri that's coming soon to us, what should we expect for new series?
Well, there's two new series. There's one that's coming sooner in the first half of the year. And the story there is it's going to just enable features that were planned for the end of 2024 or early 25 with Apple Intelligence's initial launch. Things like using your personal data to fill queries, using on-screen awareness to fulfill queries, sort of finer control of applications across the system. And then in the fall with Project Campo, there's a overhaul to Siri, which has a more conversational chatbot-like text-to-speech interface.
Mm-hmm. For the chatbot, how will it work? How is it going to be different from Gemini or ChatGPT?
Well, the big difference is that you're going to have world knowledge, so being able to ask any types of questions like you would with ChatGPT today. And then the bigger sticking point of Siri today is that it doesn't have a chatbot interface, which basically means you're able to go back and forth, add additional context, get answers, and talk to the assistant like a human being with having a full throttle conversation. And so that's the gap they're going to bridge with the chatbot version in the fall.
Mm-hmm. So are they going to be on par with what they showed at WWDC back in 2024?
By the end of this year, they'll be on par with what they showed at WWDC in 2024. And they should probably have 80% of what they showed in 2024 out, I would say, by the end of March.
Mm-hmm. Great. How is this partnership with Gemini going to change the Apple's or iOS user experience and UI?
Well, in terms of a user interface, I don't expect the user interface to change much this year other than the Siri interface, that chatbot-like text-heavy interface, just like a ChatGPT app. In terms of the overall usability, you'll have a Siri that works probably 50 to 75% better than the current Siri. You ask Siri questions today and you have to hold your breath or say a couple prayers, if not more. Dance in a circle in a particular way, hoping that it answers your question as you anticipated or correctly, hoping that it navigates you to the right place. And so this is meant to finally make amends for that promise that Apple made 15 years ago when it announced Siri.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's been 15 years, so finally it can happen.
Yes.
But on the contrary, on the long term, so App Store has been a big business of Apple, but now everyone can code by themselves. Everyone that can develop apps and publish it everywhere. So is AI going to disrupt the App Store and app ecosystem on iOS?
My belief is that the entire iOS paradigm, launching applications, moving around an operating system, downloading apps from an app store, that is all going to not only evolve, but change completely and be upended. I think apps are going to be a thing of the past in several years. I think you're going to move towards AI agents, asking your device for things, asking your phone to do things behind the scenes in the background on your behalf, and going in and out of applications is going to become legacy. And so Apple is going to need to evolve to an AI agent forward operating system and slowly move away from that. There will be new opportunities for monetization given the size of the Apple installed base, but definitely there's going to be some fundamental changes necessary. And if Apple doesn't strike first on reinventing iOS and macOS and iPadOS, you name it, for the AI era, someone else is going to reinvent their operating systems for that era first. And that's certainly something Apple does not want to happen.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you. Before we move on to the next part, how is Apple going to be catching up with all other big tech companies with AI arms race? Apple is losing the important executives in AI space. So how are they doing this?
Yeah, Apple has lost important executives in the AI space, but they've also lost AI executives that they should have fired many years ago. I still think that the head of AI for Apple since 2018, John Giannandrea, absolutely goes down his hire as Tim Cook's biggest mistake. It really put the nail in the coffin of Tim Cook's tenure here if things don't get turned around immediately with some sort of major acquisition or technology play. They are in the dumpster fire right now for AI, and this was the person who was hired to prevent that from happening, and he simply didn't.
Mm-hmm. Great. So let's move on to the next part. The fate of the Tim Cook dynasty. So this is going to be about the succession at Apple. So Tim Cook has been the CEO for more than 14 years. So his tenure is now longer than Steve Jobs. And you've been writing about the Apple's succession plan, and the Financial Times reported last year that Cook would step down as early as beginning of 2026. But how are things going regarding the succession at Apple?
Yeah, well, the Financial Times report was completely false. I'm not sure where they got that information. Actually, I know where they got it from, but it's obviously baseless. I mean, I've known for a while that there was no chance that Tim Cook was stepping down this year. So completely ridiculous that was reported in my view, but that's neither here nor there. Tim Cook, I do anticipate to be around for the foreseeable future. But it's very clear succession planning has picked up in recent years. And based on several factors, including the ages of Apple's executive team, the executives who are getting increasing scope at the company, John Ternus, the senior VP of hardware engineering since 2021, someone who I think has been in line to the Apple throne for far longer than that, seems like the heir apparent to me. There's not much alternative. The New York Times has name dropped other potential executives who they think could be CEO, head of marketing, Greg Joswiak, head of services, Eddie Q, head of retail, Deirdre O'Brien, head of software, Craig Federighi. That is also ridiculous. I'm told that none of those people are under consideration for the CEO role. The only other alternative to Ternus would be Sabi Khan, the newly appointed chief operating officer. But even then, I still believe Ternus or some sort of out of left field outside acquisition-based hire is the most likely scenario.
Mm-hmm. You wrote that the John Ternus became in charge of the design division at Apple last year, right? Was that a big factor to believe that he's a successor of Tim Cook?
Well, we talk about Ternus being the next CEO potentially, and if you want evidence, that is your only piece of evidence so far. That is a strong indicator of increased scope and responsibility and increased trust from Tim Cook in Ternus. Obviously, the design organization is a very key component of the overall Apple product experience, very core part of the overall product development process. And so putting Ternus as the overseer of that is as good signal as any, as that he's in serious consideration.
But he's been a hardware guru for a long time. But this is the AI age, the software will matter more. Is he the best talent to lead Apple in the AI age?
Yeah, that's the fundamental problem, right? He's a hardware guy. Apple gets 80% of its revenue from hardware, so that's nice. But if Apple's going to pivot to being an AI company, which it should, the question stands, is like Ternus the right person for that moment? Does he have the AI chops? And I think that is the unanswered question, and only he could answer that.
Mm-hmm. And what do you think is going to be the timing of the leadership change for Apple?
Oh, I think we're over a year away from that happening, if not more. Yeah, I don't think it's imminent. I think they have the plan in place. I know they have the plan in place, but I don't think the handoff is imminent.
What makes you think that?
Oh, I mean, just based on everything I've heard and understood, it doesn't seem like Tim Cook is ready to hand the baton off anytime soon.
Mm-hmm. Is it because the earnings is very good right now?
I think the earnings being good and things humming is a clear driver of why Tim Cook is not out right now. I seriously believe that if earnings were a huge miss, that Tim Cook would be shown the door by the board or resign or move on to some sort of different role and put in a new CEO, some fresh blood. But I think with everything humming, and I think the fact is he wants to fix this AI situation before he's out.
Mm-hmm. If you look back on the history of Apple, if you look back on what Steve Jobs did, what Tim Cook did as a leader in Apple, what is the most important responsibility for the next leader on the next generation at Apple?
The most important responsibility for the next leader is going to find a new growth engine, right? Apple cannot be the iPhone company and rely on iPhone upgrades forever. They're going to have to move away from this idea that Apple could augment revenue by building peripheral products around the franchise. They're going to have to create new franchises. And I think most importantly is to recreate the Apple product development culture and the Apple product culture itself to be more AI-centric and AI-forward from the get-go versus just being tacked on top.
Mm-hmm. For the process of making the company AI-centric, do you think the process is ongoing? Is it happening already in the organization right now?
I think to some extent it's happening, but I haven't seen a bold AI vision from Tim Cook or some fundamental changes to the way the company runs. Obviously, they're integrating AI into their processes, but I'm more so talking about moving more quickly and building AI-centric products, not in terms of how the companies actually run infrastructure-wise.
Okay, speaking of the AI-centric product, let's move on to the next part, final part. The threat of AI devices to Apple. OpenAI and former Apple designer Johnny Ive have been jointly developing the prototype of AI hardware. Everyone's been talking about it on X and everywhere. It's called the codename Sweet Pea, as it's rumored on X. And it looked like it would be a competitor to AirPods. So, and it's reported that they are actually shipping it in the second half of 2026 and what have you. So how are you expecting this to work in the industry or compete with Apple?
Well, first of all, I think there's going to be a slew of products from OpenAI. I think there's going to be the Sweet Pea earbuds, but I also think there's going to be some sort of neck-worn device that can move between a necklace and a table. I definitely think that there's a lot of stuff in the pipeline. My strong belief is they eventually want to release a phone maybe without a display, something that is in your pocket, a slab with sensors and cameras and big battery. But they'll start small. I think that Apple, if OpenAI's first product is earbuds, Apple's going to eat their lunch. I think with having the improved Siri and the Gemini model integrated into the product, that they're going to be able to have a very strong AI play with AirPods, and it's going to be a hard sell to buy OpenAI earbuds versus Apple earbuds, right? The only saving grace for them is they have the whole Android ecosystem and the outside of the Apple ecosystem. But if you're in the Apple ecosystem, I'm not sure why you would buy ChatGPT earbuds when Apple could have heavy AI integration into their own AirPods.
So is it really challenging for OpenAI to compete in the hardware industry?
I think it's going to be very challenging. I mean, if you look at the history of people who have tried to come into the hardware industry to compete with Apple, there have been very few successes. That's why you're constantly talking about the same names over and over and over again, right? You've got Apple, you've got Google hardware, which has not been a gigantic success. You have Meta hardware. They've had many wins. They have pioneered categories, but from a sales standpoint, they're nowhere near what Apple is doing. Obviously, Apple is creating tons of profits. Meta is burning a ton of cash. And so you see, and there's a reason hardware is hard. It's just difficult to pull off. And I just don't anticipate OpenAI being a huge success from the get-go. Over time, they may be able to create a product, though, that Apple can't compete with. If their AI models get even good enough, they reach something close to, AGI. But definitely, they'll be competitive, but I don't think they're going to touch Apple.
I think that goes back to Apple not being serious about AI. That Apple has been saving the position, the king of hardware for a long time, and AI companies are really struggling to compete with them, but they're really not. Is it a big factor for Apple, to make them not serious about AI?
It's critical for Apple to reinvent its hardware lineup around AI. One is recreating the iPhone and iPad and Mac user experience around AI-centric operating systems, but almost as significantly as that is rebooting the franchises around the products, the core products, and making the AirPods more AI-centric, making headsets, smart glasses, different wearables, new types of AirPods. So certainly a lot to like there.
Yeah, as we talked about, we see so many companies working on AI hardwares and OpenAI and other companies. And everyone's talking about, 2026 is going to be the year of AI hardware. Are we seeing many of those?
I think 2027 is going to be the year of the AI hardware. I think you're going to see AI hardware from Apple, from Amazon, the OpenAI earbuds. I don't think Meta is going to have anything significant this year. I think they'll have more significant product back over in 2027. So I think 2027 is going to be the big year for Apple as well as the industry.
Mm-hmm. From your perspective as a reporter covering consumer hardware, from your view, what is AI hardware, AI native hardware, going to look like in the future?
Yeah, AI native hardware are devices that can be controlled by your voice with instant access to information, and you can correspond with it like it's another human being and having the brain of a human being. So you don't have to tailor your voice or your request to the hardware. You just talk to it the way you want to talk to it, and it's going to get done whatever you need it to get done. Whatever the task at hand is that object or that device is specifically tailored for. You don't have to go poking around for applications. You don't have to go poking around for settings. You just talk to it and it just works. And in many cases, you don't need a display. What you need are the sensors and cameras and battery technologies and gesture receivers in order to make that all work.
Mm-hmm. So in order to do that, it feels like smartphone makes sense for now.
The smartphone has the hardware that you need to take advantage of AI. I mean, Apple has done a very good job laying the foundation for years to have AI hardware from custom silicon, from sensors, for gesture receivers, for cameras, for battery, for industrial design, heat sinks, etc. They just need the software and the services built on AI stacks to take advantage of it.
Do you think there's going to be the other form factor than smartphone to make the best of AI?
Yeah, I think wearables, I think earbuds, I think watches, I think next generation devices on your body, glasses certainly are going to be prime places for AI technology. You know, having sensors that are forward facing and always looking at the world are going to be essential.
Is Apple going to be able to be at the forefront of that, or is there going to be other companies?
I think it's a coin flip. I mean, Apple has all the ingredients and all the money to be successful. It's just about getting the right ingredients from the AI side and changing the corporate culture and the product development standards and in ways that is all done in order to get these things working properly. So I guess we'll see.
Yeah. How are you thinking about Apple's devices going to evolve over time with the Gemini's foundation models, like smart glasses or display with a robotic arm that you talked about?
Yeah, I mean, I think those products are going to be heavily AI focused and AI at their core. The robotic arm home device is going to be incredibly nifty and useful in some respects. I don't think it'll be a big seller. The smart glasses obviously are going to have AI at their very core to help you navigate your environment and get things done. And having the more powerful Siri model powered by Gemini at the core of it is going to be a big help.
I was wondering if the robotic thing would sell well.
I don't think it's going to sell well. It's a category, though, that's becoming increasingly popular in China. You see other companies are doing this already, but I don't think it's going to sell well.
Everyone has been talking about physical AI right now, and I was wondering how Apple is working on that, and what are you listening?
They've got some early explorations around robots that can free roam in your home. They're working on a robotic arm for use in facilities and retail stores and operational plants and whatnot. But I think it's not a sure thing that Apple's going to get into physical AI.
Okay, so before I let you go, the final question is, do you think the Apple management is able to get the company back on track to compete toe-to-toe with other big tech companies in the midst of AI arms race?
Absolutely. It's just about pulling the right levers. It's about putting the right people in place and making the right changes. But with the amount of money that Apple has, the resources Apple has, really anything should be possible.
Great. Thank you so much for your time, Mark. It's great to have you back
Yeah, you got
on
it.
this show. Thank you.
And I'll see you in a few weeks.
Yes, in Japan.